Hi, I'm a possum and I find garbage. Today's garbage is Borderlands, a movie based on a video game about annoying characters and obnoxious humor. Before I start, I should point out that I don't know much of anything about Borderlands, other than what I've absorbed through secondhand exposure. I played the first game once for maybe an hour when it was new, but I never got into it. If you're stupid, you might say that makes me unfit to review this movie, when in fact it makes me able to judge it objectively, free of any fandom bias, just on its own merits, of which it has none. So, of course, this is a video game movie, and video game movies have a bad reputation. But why? Why is it apparently so hard to adapt a video game into a movie? Well, aside from the fact that most of them are cheap cash grabs made by people who don't care about the source material, most video games are built around a central gameplay mechanic. These mechanics don't naturally lend themselves to storytelling. Some are more flexible than others, of course, like Sonic the Hedgehog. Those games are built around running fast, and you could certainly write a story around a character who runs fast. But if you wanted to make a movie about, say, F-Zero, it couldn't just be 90 minutes of cars driving around a track. And that's the problem Borderlands runs into. The main gimmick of those games is the randomly generated guns that all have unique balance of traits, so no two playthroughs are ever the same. You can't really translate that into a non-interactive medium like film. I mean, obviously a game isn't just its mechanics. They have stories on top of that, but the mechanics are the core of the experience of playing a game. And more often than not, that core has to be left out when adapting a game into a movie. This is the fundamental problem with making film adaptations of video games. The things that make a game simply don't translate to film. You have to leave out the single most important thing, and that just leaves you with the story of the game, which was more than likely built around the core mechanics that you have to leave out. See, unlike any other medium, most games are made first and foremost with the mechanics in mind, and then the story is written to accommodate them. Why is there a space marine shooting demons on Mars? Because it's a game about shooting things. Why is there an evil AI running a big laboratory and forcing people to test out a portal gun? Because it's a game about four-dimensional physics puzzles. Why are there murderous animatronics trying to break into the security office? Because it's a game about watching security monitors. Whatever the story of a video game is, it's really just an excuse for whatever the core gameplay mechanic is. There are exceptions, of course, like story-based games where they started with the story and then just tacked on generic third-person shooter mechanics to justify it being a video game when it probably would have been better off as a movie or a TV show to begin with. But the vast majority of games start with the mechanics, and whatever story they have is written around them. So what happens when you adapt a video game into a story-focused medium like film, but the story of the source material was an afterthought? You get garbage, that's what. Now, I don't know what the story of Borderlands the video game is, so I looked up some guy's summary on Reddit and got bored and stopped reading a third of the way through. But it seems like a typical go to place, do thing, go to next place, do another thing story that most video games have. And you know how movies which follow that formula tend to turn out? That's a pretty good reason not to adapt the story directly, which they didn't. But some of the decisions they made about what to keep and not keep are just baffling. I don't know much about Borderlands or who any of these characters are, but if you showed me a picture of Lilith from the games, Cate Blanchett is the last actress I would have picked to play her. And I don't know if her portrayal in the movie is at all accurate to the source material, but even then, Cate Blanchett is horribly miscast. She's the type of actress you get to play a queen or a teacher, not a wannabe Star-Lord-like, snarky action hero. Speaking of Star-Lord, this movie wants to be like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it has a fraction of the personality. And no, annoying is not a personality. In most movies about a ragtag team of misfits getting together to go on an adventure, the characters will have some sort of chemistry with each other. The characters in this movie don't. They all just kind of hate each other, which sounds like it could be a good formula for comedy, but they don't play off each other very well. One of them, a CGI robot named Claptrap, voiced by Jack Black, never does anything useful and is just along for the ride. The other characters don't even respond to anything he says half the time, which makes me wonder if any of his dialogue was actually scripted, or if Jack Black just improvised everything he said while he was in the recording booth. It could go either way, because the writing is credited to some guy named Joe Crombie, which is a fake name because the guy who wrote it was pissed off that Eli Roth came in and ruined everything he wrote, and he didn't want his name on it. When the writer of your movie doesn't want credit, maybe that should give you some pause for thought. On the subject of Claptrap, he's the most annoying character in any movie ever. He seriously never shuts up. I mean, he talks for every single second that he's on screen, even when there's no one around to hear him. He's worse than Jar Jar Binks, I'm not exaggerating. It reminds me of this German animated film from 1992 called The Magic Voyage. The English dub has characters just constantly muttering about whatever at all times, even when their mouths aren't moving. I guess because they were afraid kids would get bored if there was even 1 second of silence. Borderlands is the modern version of that. Now, you might argue that's true to his character from the games, but guess what? I don't care. I don't care if this character's portrayal in the movie is true to his portrayal in the source material, because it's a bad character, and him being annoying doesn't somehow magically become okay just because it's intentional. Imagine you go to a restaurant and order soup, and the soup they give you tastes like diarrhea. So you complain, and the chef tells you it's meant to taste like diarrhea. Would that somehow make it okay? No, because as it turns out, something being intentionally bad doesn't somehow magically make it tolerable. This character, Claptrap, is the worst thing about the movie, and he actually personifies it because this movie seems to be operating under the grave misapprehension that annoying equals funny. And this movie is constantly trying to be funny in the worst way possible. You know that Joss Whedon humor? The, well, that just happened. He's right behind me, isn't he? That was awkward. Humor that the Marvel movies have become known for. That's every single second of this movie. I mean, it seriously never lets up. Back when the game Forspoken was announced, and the trailer had the protagonist talking about her freaking talking armband, and how she could move things with her freaking mind, just to make fun of it, I made a thread on Twitter where I reimagined Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal with the same style of writing. Read some of these, then imagine a feature-length movie that's just that for every single second of the runtime. That's the Borderlands movie. And I didn't laugh once during the whole thing. Maybe a little kid will find it funny when the robot starts defecating bullets, because adults certainly won't. But this movie is also pretty violent, and nearly every line of dialogue has the S word in it. So I don't know who this movie was made for. Apparently no one. And not only is the humor awful, the plot makes no sense. I'm just gonna spoil the whole thing, because the fact that this is now one of the biggest box office flops of all time tells me no one cares. So there's this girl named Tiny Tina, who was genetically engineered by the rich bad guy named Atlas with the DNA of ancient aliens because they need her to open a magical alien vault full of technology they can use to take over the universe or whatever. But she gets rescued by Kevin Hart. So he gets Cate Blanchett's character Lilith to go find her and bring her back. But then a bunch of other factions also want her so they can open the vault. So the movie takes the form of go to place to do a thing, bad guys show up, a fight and or chase ensues, rinse and repeat for 100 minutes. But then it turns out Tiny Tina doesn't actually have the alien DNA, but Atlas didn't know that even though he made her. It turns out Lilith is the one with the alien DNA, but she doesn't know that until the end of the movie, so she sprouts flaming angel wings and flies around shooting fireballs until Atlas threatens to kill Tiny Tina. So she opens the vault, and she somehow knew there was a monster in there which eats him. And then the movie ends with everyone celebrating the bad guy's death with a fireworks show. I don't know if any of that happens in the games, and I don't care because it's stupid either way. And if it seems like I glossed over the plot really fast, that's because that's all that happens in this movie. There's enough plot to fill up maybe 10 minutes worth of story, and the rest of it is just quote-unquote funny banter and weightless action scenes with Looney Tunes physics, which are totally tensionless because you know only the bad guys are gonna get hurt. I mean, there is one part where it looks like Kevin Hart sacrifices himself to save everyone else, but then it turns out he survived, so it didn't mean anything. From what I can remember, the characters don't even have arcs. I think the only change Lilith goes through is she finds out she has alien powers. And Cate Blanchett plays her like she doesn't care. She comes across as sarcastic, even when she's not supposed to be. And Kevin Hart isn't even trying at all. At one point, they go to a club and talk to some woman doing a cartoonish Jessica Rabbit voice. You look at the phoned-in performances and the bad green screen effects, and you get the sense no one who worked on this cared. The entire movie has this glossy, oversaturated, overproduced look where nothing looks real. It reminds me of the Warcraft movie, which somehow managed to look both incredibly expensive and incredibly cheap at the same time. They spent like $110 million on this movie. It doesn't look quite as bad as some of the more recent Marvel movies, which all somehow cost like $300 million and ends up looking like Asylum films. So there's actually some realistic possibility that it wasn't made for money laundering like those obviously are. So instead, I'm thinking this is a tax write-off. Alright, that's all I have to say about the Borderlands movie. I'm gonna end this video with a challenge to my audience. In the comments below, answer this question. Why did the duck cross the road? Whoever writes the funniest answer wins a slap to the face. And don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're not already, and check my channel for other videos you may have missed, and send me your fan art and support me on Patreon. The links are in the pinned comment. Bye.